Thank you, gentlemen. I realize we're moving at warp speed across some very weighty issues here, but there will be time to return to all these issues. Could I now ask Consul-General Karen Lanyon to come back up and introduce our next speaker, Minister Robb? Thank you.
Hi, I'm back. Terry said I'm all over the place, and I am, so I'm back up here again. I always love watching Ambassador Blythe and Ambassador Beazley on stage together. It is just a magical dance. It's a little bit like Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire, and I'm not going to say which one is which, but it was fantastic. So thank you very much. That was very informative and very entertaining. One thing I'd just like to echo the point that they made. I know that everybody out there is talking China, 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 but it is not all about China. As someone who's spent a lot of time in the region, they are right. There's a lot of other very important players out there for both the US and Australia, Indonesia and Vietnam being just two. And you will see this theme coming out again and again today. We're trying to retrain your brains, I think. The other thing is that it isn't all about marine strategic interests. Good economic sense and economic outcomes are another good reason for us to all be working together in the Asia Pacific. The reason we chose LA to have this event, we're having another one in Washington, but we chose LA because the West Coast is on the rim of the Asia Pacific. You have long been trading with Asian countries through Long Beach and the LA ports. You know, there has been great trade linkages already, and they need to be stepped up. I know that you understand that here in LA more than the rest of the US. So that's why we've chosen LA today. And to talk a bit more about those points, I'd love to introduce, and it's a great pleasure to have him here throughout this G'day platform, our Minister for Trade and Investment, Andrew Robb.
Well, thanks very much, Karen, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and congratulations to Karen and her G'day USA team. They put on a great program. Again, a huge turnout today for a very important subject, and 4 or 5 days here in LA, tomorrow in San Francisco, then Houston, and then New York. So it's a big program and a very important and successful initiative. Could I also thank our distinguished Ambassador Kim Beazley for not stealing my thunder. I appreciate it. He's very capable of saying most of what I'm saying here today. It is a pleasure really to be in Los Angeles to provide and to promote Australia to Americans and to talk about the future of our partnership that's been growing over more than 70 years. What I want to emphasise this morning is how the strength of our partnership is really in many ways potentially a world-beating asset as we look to the burgeoning economies of Asia. There's so much that we can, especially jointly, as well as directly, but especially jointly, we can offer. And there are huge opportunities that are presented. As Australia's Trade and Investment Minister, my job is clear: to promote the creation of an economic and trade environment conducive to the pro-growth agenda of the new Australian government. Election last September. So how are we doing that in simple terms? Our overarching economic objective is to remove from centre stage unsustainable government spending, endless rule changes and damaging new taxes, and replace these with robust growth of the private sector. We've got 4 clear principles that are guiding our attempt to achieve this. Firstly, to live within our means, to, as quickly as possible, restore budget surpluses. Secondly, to see very substantial deregulation and therefore business costs reduced. Thirdly, to restore a culture of personal responsibility, not a looking to government to deal with problems approach, rather approach a culture of personal responsibility. And fourthly, and very importantly, to back our strengths as a country. We want open markets, greater trade liberalisation, less red tape and more investment. and a focus on the 4 or 5 things that as a country we do best. We are determined to encourage private sector-led growth in Australia. That means getting taxes down, reducing regulation and raising productivity. We are matching our words with actions. Legislation introduced into the Parliament from our first week in government embodied this new approach, reducing business costs, scrapping economically damaging taxes such as removing the carbon and mining taxes, and deregulating to reduce compliance and approval burdens. In some cases we're seeing up to a 2-year reduction in the approval time for major projects. Australia is under new management and open for business, and it's a very important part of positioning ourselves to take advantage of the phenomena that is emerging and going on around us in the region. To grow faster, we must attract foreign investment, and I can assure you that we recognise the huge significance of foreign investment. It's why I'm spending a lot of time, I'm Trade Investment Minister, why I'm spending a lot of time, even in this visit, with one-on-one meetings with some of the biggest companies across every sphere to see if we can entice more of their involvement into Australia and into the region. We are a country built on foreign investment, from the first fleet in 1788 until today, and the US is, as Ambassador Blyche mentioned, is a long way ahead as our largest investment partner. But we're now also serious investors in our own right. If you're looking for a dollar, we're good people to know, increasingly in Australia, especially through our retirement fund arrangements. Ever since the Howard government signed our free trade agreement with the US, our mutual investment has increased exponentially. That's good for you because in our pension funds we have the 4th largest sum of money globally, currently at $1.7 trillion. That will grow over the next 15 years to over $5 trillion. That part of it invested overseas will be heavily invested here into the United States, and that has been the case so far. To illustrate the effect of that at the present time, the US invests 10 times more in Australia, directly and indirectly, than you do in China. But we, as President Obama acknowledged recently, are now in your top 10, and we invest 20 times more in the US than we invest in China. There is a very strong and enduring economic relationship. Our intent to promote private sector investment as a driver for growth is demonstrated by the fact that since our government came to office some 3.5 months ago, federal environmental approvals have been given to $400 billion worth of projects, $400 billion worth of projects, some of which were stalled for up to 6 years. Environmental approvals had been satisfactorily gained, but not ticked off by the government. Most of these projects will require foreign funding, and in many cases very informed foreign funding. A primary driver for this interest in investing in Australia is that we possess very well established links in Asia, where growth has been phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal, as other speakers have mentioned. There are now some 600 million people in the middle class, from India through to China and all the countries in between. And in 15 to 20 years, that 600 million will grow to 3.2 billion people in the middle class. Not in 2050, not in 2100, but in the next 15 to 20 years. It is an enormous opportunity, and it also brings some enormous challenges along the way to accommodate that unbelievable, almost inconceivable growth in the middle class. And many people tend to, particularly I think from my experience in the United States, tend to focus on China in terms of this explosion in the middle class. Yet Indonesia, our closest neighbour, has a population in excess of 250 million, a middle class growing rapidly above 50 million people, and a GDP that will exceed Germany's within a decade. India has well in excess of 150 million people in the middle class and growing rapidly out of a population of 1.2 billion people. To give another example, if Vietnam was included, hypothetically, into the European community, it would be the biggest country in the EU by population. And again, it is growing exponentially, and its middle class and its education system and all the rest are up there with China. This offers profound opportunities for the US and Australia across the Asia Pacific. The 2040 Austrade benchmark report, which I'm releasing this morning and should be on your tables for you to take away, showcases Australia's strong competitive position. The report considers the key investor indicators of growth, innovation, talent, location and business, and compares Australia's position with other countries. Looking at these 5 key areas demonstrates that Australia possesses strong economic fundamentals and is a great place to do business. In growth, we're the only OECD country without a recession in 22 years. In terms of innovation, we're one of the top countries in the world in terms of number of publications in highly influential journals per capita. With regard to talent, almost 40% of our workforce holds tertiary qualifications, and we rank 3rd in the world in terms of the number of universities in the top 100. There's 3,000 higher education institutions in the United States. We've got 39 universities, and 5 of them are in the top 100 in the world. It does show the quality of the educational experience in Australia. On location, our place in the Asia zone is a significant advantage. 10 of Australia's top 12 goods and services export markets are in the Asia region. 10 of our top 12 export markets. And in terms of the ease of doing business, we are ranked number 3 in the world, confirmed again just yesterday, in ranking of economic freedom, behind only the island states of Hong Kong and Singapore, and well ahead of most OECD countries. These are just a few select facts from that Austrade benchmark report that you've got in front of you. For today's discussion, though, I want to draw your particular attention to the matter of location. Our links to Asia encompass not just geographic proximity or government and business ties, but also strong cultural and educational links to Asia. 10% of Australia's population speaks an Asian language at home. The fact that so many of Asia's government and business elites studied in Asia via the Colombo plan, as Karen mentioned earlier, since the 1950s is a huge soft power edge. At the time of the plan's inception, much of Asia was still ruled by colonial powers. This shows great prescience by Australians imagining a different Asia. Our new reverse Colombo plan will make this a two-way flow, with many thousands of Australia's best and brightest students in the coming years studying in Asian universities. As the shortest long-haul flight destination from China or Southeast Asia, we are welcoming rapidly increasing numbers of middle-class Asian tourists. 750,000 tourists from China last year, a 17.3% increase on the year before, and a dramatic change in the demographic coming in from tour groups which dominated a lot of their trade experience with Australia, now to high-value individuals and couples looking for high-value experiences across Australia. Our position within the same time zone as Asia enables businesses to easily collaborate on projects and for Australian expats to play the long game in Asia, because they can easily balance working in Asia with staying in touch with friends and family in Asia. 3-hour time spread across the region. Having run a company in Australia out of Arkansas for 5 years, and then having run a company into Asia for several years, I can attest to the fact that there is no comparison. If you are in the same time zone, there are great advantages, especially in terms of, as I put it, playing the long game, where you can more easily balance working in Asia and staying in touch with family and friends and all the rest. Our economic integration with Asia has helped drive Australia to become the 5th largest provider of education services for foreign university students, a $15 billion a year business for Australia. Our 4th largest export is education, more than the value of our wool exports or grain exports, which we were built on the back of the sheep and the wool industry. But now education, our 4th largest export. We're one of the world's top 10 tourism earning countries and number 4 in the world in exports of minerals and petroleum products. In comparison, consider for a moment that more than 99% of the United States' 30 million companies do not export. More than 99% of your companies do not export, a percentage that is significantly lower than all other developed countries. And of the US companies that do export, 58% export to only one country. The potential is enormous, absolutely enormous, to deal into so many countries across the Asia Pacific and to get a beachhead to participate in the decades ahead with that growth. For US companies looking to make their first steps into the Asia region, Australia offers a bridgehead with a large Asian language-speaking population and a highly skilled workforce, sharing a similar culture to yourselves, the rule of law with one of the world's most transparent business environments, and strong protection for your intellectual property. So I say, let's play to our respective strengths, capitalise on Australia's position as an investment gateway, and look at ways to fully exploit the advantages of our partnership. Our trade and investment cooperation geared around Asian export markets is already stimulating very large US investments in Australia. To give some examples, Australia sits at the pinnacle of Chevron's project investment portfolio through Chevron's major commitments to the massive $55 billion Gorgon project, gas project, and the $30 billion Wheatstone liquefied natural gas export project currently under construction off Australia's northwest coast. The US agricultural giant Cargill has in 2013 continued its significant investment in Australia, adding malting to its existing investments in grain storage and marketing, flour milling, beef feedlots, meat processing and tanning. The collaboration between US private equity firm Payne & Partners and the Costa Group, Australia's largest private producer, marketer and exporter of fresh fruit and vegetables. 4,000 hectares of farmland, 7,000 jobs, total sales of over 600 million in 2011. And the TIAA CREF's significant recent investments in Australian farms. Significant investment looking to leverage markets into the Asia Pacific region. Consider this in the context of rapidly growing Asian middle classes with changing demands for food, rapidly growing income, and the potential is obvious. In Los Angeles, this list would not be complete without reference to Australia's contribution to and collaboration with the film industry. Over the last 10 years, $2.6 billion has been invested by US companies in film and television productions in Australia. Australians have received 150 nominations over the history of the Oscars, and of those nominations, we've won 47, including 40 awarded for Australians' expertise behind the screen or camera in fields as diverse as cinematography, costume design, editing and animation. One notable recent award by the US Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Science was that given to Adelaide-based company Rising Sun Research, which picked up a Technical Achievement Award for the development of the motion picture software, CineSync. This technology has been used in recent films including Gravity, Wolverine and The Life of Pi. You are fortunate today to have Greg Vassar, who has had a lot of experience with film production. He's involved with the biggest as the biggest independent film producer in Los Angeles, and the company has had enormous experience in China, and it's the big projects there at the moment. I think you get a wonderful insight. He's got a wonderful perspective on the opportunities in that particular sector later on today. And as an aside, of course, we are expecting to increase our Oscar nomination count on Thursday. Go Kate. Okay. In education, Australia and the US have pushed for a cooperative student exchange agreement in the region through the grouping known as Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. Over 1 million students are expected to be part of this, and your American students will be in great company, as Australia is currently the destination of choice for around 500,000 Asian students studying abroad. And our respective university precincts are great examples of trans-Pacific traffic and world-class research and development capabilities, such as in the field of medical research. US company Amgen run extensive clinical trials and research in Australia, while Australian company CSL is a very extensive supporter of medical R&D at US universities in addition to Australia. In fact, the pharmaceutics industry, largely from the United States, conducts now close to $1 billion of R&D each year within Australia. Australia and the US have had a free trade agreement in place since 2005. Over those 8 years, two-way trade has increased by some 38%. It puts a lie to those who denigrate free trade agreements, and a lot of the forces against free trade in this country need to be challenged by the practical outcomes of things such as the free trade agreement that we've achieved between our two countries, with a 38% increase in two-way trade in just 8 years. Australia is also actively pursuing free trade agreements, and on top of the deal we recently struck with South Korea, we have ambitious aims to soon conclude free trade agreements with Japan and China, with high-quality market access undertakings offering Australian exporters significant market opportunities. Currently, these three countries account for 50% of Australia's exports. Add to this the work we're doing together to strengthen regional institutions across the Asia-Pacific, building and consolidating networks, driving reform. Through APEC, the East Asia Summit and Australia's current chairmanship of the G20, together we are in a position to drive reform and integration, to pursue strong private sector-led economic growth and to achieve our trade and investment goals. 2014 is a unique opportunity for us in Australia through our presidency of the G20. Global growth is subdued and the outlook is not improving quickly enough. The world needs new approaches to ensure that economic growth is sustained in the years ahead. The key is for governments to enable the private sector to drive economic activity. Only the private sector can deliver the sustainable growth in investment, trade and job creation that the world needs. I'd put to you the interventionist approach has failed to deliver sustainable economic growth and jobs. And I know since I took this job, I've now met, in the 3.5, 4 months, I've met something in the order of 35 of my counterparts around the world. And what I do discern in all sorts of economic environments, from China right through the most developed countries, is and a lot of the South American countries as well, what I had discerned is a disillusionment with the interventionist approaches and a view that's forming that they cannot deliver the sustainable economic growth that's necessary to take the world back into a stronger and more sustainable economic position. It means having business invest, build the infrastructure of the future and grow trade in goods and services. These imperatives will help shape the G20 agenda that we will drive this year. Similarly, the work of the East Asia Summit and the newly invigorated Indian Ocean Rim Association, of which we are currently chair, are integral to strengthening the structures through which our trade and investment goals can be pursued, particularly as Australia's view of Asia incorporates the scope of the Indian Ocean too. The world is awash now with these bilateral and regional trade agreements, and given the appalling record of the multilateral agreements and the ability to reach anything of a sustainable and comprehensive nature, I see a lot of these bilateral and regional agreements as building blocks, if you like, to a broader, almost, pseudo multilateral agreement as you build enough of these agreements around the world. Our efforts on the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership are key parts of this regional agenda of integration and key parts of these building blocks of greater and greater freer trade within important country groupings. Both can support greater liberalisation in the Asia-Pacific region. Like the United States, Australia can see the huge potential benefits of liberalising trade among our significant players in our region and within the global economy. The TPP negotiations are rapidly approaching a conclusion, and we are working hard with our partners to negotiate a high-quality agreement that gets government out of the way of business. That means reducing regulation and trade barriers and harmonising trade rules. We welcome the United States leadership in setting an ambitious timeframe and agenda for the negotiations. It is right that we have high expectations for the TPP, but as in all such agreements, the last yard is the hardest. What is on the table is close to agreement on so many issues. There are not left thousands of pages of negotiations to be undertaken. We are very close. The landing zones, as they call it, have been reached on the vast majority of issues, but only the market access offerings are yet to be properly articulated and placed on the table. What is on the table is so close to agreement, but only if the market access offerings are satisfactory. At the moment, across the board, they are not. When signed, the TPP stands to be a vital building block in establishing and confirming the rules-based regional international trade order, and with new 21st century topics of how we deal with state-owned enterprises, how we deal with e-commerce, these sorts of things, the rules that the TPP is looking to establish will give some order and maintain freer markets in all of these areas than if we let things stumble along and grow as they are at the present time. Other major economies are already showing interest in joining. Korea's in Washington this week to discuss it. TPP holds the potential to become the basis for a set of rules across so many of these 21st century issues. On the political front, by the way, we don't think the TPP simply as a good thing to do in economic terms. Congress ultimately will deliberate on this. When they do, they need to think of it in its broadest strategic context. Most of the Asian parties are members of a plethora of regionally based trade-enhancing relations. Almost every country in the region has or is negotiating a free trade agreement with China. Here we have half the global economy now in a trading web in the region. 600 million people in the middle class, 20% of the world's middle class now. 3 billion and 60% of the world's middle class in 15 years' time. The US isn't much in the game now, I'd say to you. A successful TPP puts you at the very heart of those developments and will help the US and the other 11 countries influence the shape of trade agreements and trade rules as this region unfolds. Let's be clear. This is huge. All of the 12 TPP parties representing 40% of global income will derive substantial jobs growth if we can pull this off. Further ahead, Australia is looking to building towards free trade agreements with Indonesia, a market of 250 million people, one of the 4 predicted future economic giants, along with Mexico and Nigeria and Turkey and the Gulf Cooperation Council, also with India, a huge market for Australia in the future, with already many significant cultural, historical and people-to-people ties. The fastest growing language in Australia is Hindi. Through participation in the TPP and other Asian free trade agreements, Australia and the US will be better positioned to capture a significant share of the emerging high-value market opportunity in the region. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, the Australia-US alliance in the Asia-Pacific region is important for many reasons. You heard a discussion earlier about the defence and security issues. Good economic relations is a very powerful part of good defence arrangements. As the closest of allies, together we are promoting peace and security in the region, which is important in itself, and as well being the surest way to deliver a thriving and prosperous region into the future. Just a simple example of the skill set both our countries possess in terms of managing water in difficult environments such as California's water situation and Australia as a dry economy, a dry continent. Our ability, our knowledge, our innovation, our technology for managing water in the most efficient and effective way is available for areas such as the Mekong Delta, where many countries are looking to share water, and it holds the potential in this century of water and food security for precipitating all sorts of conflicts. If those issues can be managed properly, if the water resource can be managed properly, if techniques in trading of water and all the rest are able to be imposed, which cut across countries and state borders and whatever, these are material and important contributions to peace and security and not just economic growth. They are all interlinked in a way, and we have got the experience between us and the resources between us and the opportunity and location between us to influence in a most significant way, in a way that is not currently occurring in the decades ahead. And I put to you, it is a very important development that we do get to that point. Otherwise, we will have wasted an opportunity and we won't have met our responsibility as highly developed countries to share our knowledge, our expertise, our capital and our services in a way which will allow the peaceful and efficient development of the economies in the regions around us. Australia is also the ideal destination for companies wanting to tap into the region. Australia's stable economy, democratic traditions and strong rule of law make it the perfect entree into the Asia-Pacific. Our two countries have shared a long history of working together in the Asia-Pacific. The US strategic rebalance or pivot into the region just gives the partnership new impetus and more opportunities. In many ways, this underscores the importance, the critical importance, I put to you, in seeing a successful conclusion of the Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations. It is so very much a big part of a successful pivot by the United States into the region. For Australia to fully achieve its potential to provide high-quality resources and energy, food and fibre, education, health and aged care, and tourism and hospitality, the five big areas of strength for our economy, as a country with investment opportunities surpassing our own ability to fund them, we need informed US capital and know-how. Plus, Australia can not only provide great investment opportunities for the US, but also a beachhead for direct access to the exploding middle-class Asian markets. I commend the 2014 Austrade Benchmark Report to you all. It makes for very interesting reading and provides a solid basis upon which to plan the future direction for US-Australia business collaborations in Asia. If working together closely with our friends in the United States, we can combine all that with an ambitious Trans-Pacific trade liberalisation agenda and tackle the huge potential of the new Asian middle class, then for companies and their employees right around both our great nation, the future's unlimited. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Minister Robb. You set the stage perfectly for our next panel, which will start shortly on the TPP trade agreement. We're going to break for a short coffee break. There's coffee at the back of the hall. Could I ask Chris Cura and his panelists to come over to the left-hand side, my left, your right-hand side of the hall to get mic'd up for the next panel. We'll see you back in 12 minutes.